So this video is going to be a different kind of thing for this channel, both in terms of scope and in terms of format. You can already tell that the format is different because there's no song happening right now. We're just sitting down and having a conversation. This is a video that both specifically and as a category of video, I've been wanting to kind of get around to making for a while now. And I figure here at the start of 2024, it's a great time to maybe implement a new series on this channel. You may have noticed that over the course of 2023, we really upped the amount of studio tips and tricks, mixing and production pieces that we did on this channel. Things that kind of keep things fresh from me, things that lean into what I'm really feeling inspired by in my workflow when it comes to writing music, both on and off of this YouTube channel. And I think that this might be a similar kind of thing. So if it is useful to you as well, please comment down below, let me know, maybe suggest some topics. I am all ears. But the specific thing I wanted to talk about today is tape delay. It is an effect that I have grown increasingly obsessed with over the last couple of years. When I first started getting into effects, my first love when it came to delay was analog delay. And over time, I have really found a lot of incredible value in tape specifically. And you probably have noticed that you see a predominant amount of tape delay being used on the channel these days. And so I want to talk about the three categories of tape delay. So we're not just doing like a top 5 favorite tape delay pedals or anything like that. What I want to talk about today is the 3 different categories, the 3 different ways tape delay can be had in your workflow, the pros and cons of each, and my kind of standout picks for each category. And those 3 categories are category number 1, analog electromagnetic tape machines, real tape echoes. Category number 2 is going to be delay pedals, the thing that we have all bonded over on this channel over the last several years. And category 3 is going to be tape delay in plugin form on your computer. So let's get into those 3 categories, the pros and cons, and then we'll discuss my favorite implementation in each of those categories and give each of them a listen. And let's start things off with category number 1, the real analog tape machine. There are a surprising number of implementations of real tape in the industry. Obviously, the kind of classic, most ubiquitous example is the Roland Space Echo, the RE201 and 301 to a lesser extent. You also have the Vincent Echo Rec, you have old Echoplexes, and you've got, of course, the Echofix EF-X2 and EF-X3, which is the tape machine that I have here in my studio. Now, the pros of these are, as they say, there is no substitute for the real thing. And there is something truly magical about hearing and listening to a real tape machine, especially with the kind of go-to workflow that most real tape echoes implement, which includes a typically pretty legendary sounding analog preamp, which offers grit and color and saturation in a way that can be really, really useful, both in terms of taking digital effects and reamping them through just the preamp on it itself to add this analog gain stage to an effect, as well as being able to kind of like push your amp to a really great sweet spot. I love the sound of my amps running through the EF-X3, even if I'm not using the echo in it, because I just find that very often it adds this additional kind of stage of gain and color, even if I'm still doing something more on the clean side of the kind of like tonal spectrum. Like I said, that authenticity of real tape is just something magical. The way tape degrades in real life is something that I really love. And the more I've used this, the more I've appreciated it as an effect, a sound design tool, and everything else along the way. But of course, there are cons to real tape echoes. Obvious con number 1 is they break down, or they can break down. Part of why I'm such a huge fan of the Echofix stuff is because they started as a repair company and a replacement parts company for space echoes, and along the way developed their own high quality, more reliable unit, and that's amazing. But there's still, if you buy one of these, it still comes with a maintenance kit, and some amount of regular maintenance to keep these things in high quality working order is necessary. And vintage units are notorious for being somewhat unreliable and definitely not road ready, which is a major limitation if you are somebody who wants to take a vintage Echo unit out on the road with you. Drawback number 2 is, of course, lack of kind of modulation on these things. When you have digital emulations of a tape machine, you can implement things like tape wear, crinkle, damage, all those things that add warble, modulation, kind of failing mechanics to change the speed intermittently for some really nice pitch modulation. All those things are signs of wear and tear and damage to your machine, which would require you to actually wear and tear your tape or slightly damage your machine of a real kind of pretty expensive piece of gear, which means you are sacrificing kind of on-demand tape modulation, on-demand tape crinkle, that kind of thing, if you go with an analog unit, which is kind of a fair trade-off. It is a real thing to contend with if you are in the market for a high-quality implementation of tape echo. And honestly, drawback number 3, this is not a drawback for me personally, but it is very much for some people, and that is real tape machines have white noise. Tape hiss is a very real thing, both in terms of like tape mastering units in a real studio and smaller tape machines like this. There is a tape hiss that is present that a lot of digital units will let you access or mute, depending on kind of whether or not you want that in your sound. But with the real thing, tape hiss is just a reality of the situation. And for me personally, it adds character. But you may not be in a position where that is kind of conducive for your workflow, for the mix you are aiming to kind of put together. But let's talk about the Echofix specifically as the unit we have here in the studio. I have used almost every implementation of kind of mainstream real tape machine out there. I've used 201s, 301s, Echofix or Echo Rex, and I of course own the Echofix itself. For me, this thing is an amazing piece of gear because it is both very, very reliable and has all of that high quality tape sound, but there are a couple of additional things about it that are just wonderful. One of them is the direct outputs on the unit itself, the ability to take all of those 4 different delay heads in the unit and run them as individual sends to your DAW or mixer or wherever else, giving you the ability to take a single mono tape unit and turn it into a full spectrum stereo sound design tool, which is quite wonderful. Number 2, it has high quality analog chorus and spring reverb built into it. They both sound excellent. And thing number 3 is, and this is one of my favorite things about a real tape echo, and no offense and no shade to every digital emulation on the planet, nothing in the world sounds like real tape when you turn the motor off. The sound of tape slowing down on a real unit is just something. It's whatever the opposite of an existential crisis is. I love it so much. So let's give the Echofix a listen. Let's give that tape echo a listen. Let's play with that tape speed. Let's listen to some of those heads and let's pan some of that stuff out. Category number 2, and this is going to be the most ubiquitous, especially for my audience, is going to be tape delay in effect pedal format. This is the most widely available, most used implementation of tape echo. I mean, in the world, it has to be. And the pros here are obvious and many. Tape delay pedals are very much a something for everyone kind of situation. They come in all physical sizes, different feature sets, different price points, different designs, and there are a million emulations of individual tape echoes from the real world. There are, a half a dozen different builders of tape echo in the world, different models of analog tape, but there are hundreds of implementations of specific and slightly tweaked versions of those models recreated meticulously across the industry, across the world. They're also the easiest to implement into your rig, especially if you are a guitar player or somebody who plays outboard keyboards, that kind of thing. You probably, especially if you're watching this channel, you probably already have a pedal board, and you probably have some form of tape echo on that board in some capacity. Two of my favorites, but not the one we are going to highlight today, are the legendary and probably one of the most beloved guitar pedals ever made in earnest, the Strymon L-Cap tape echo, as well as the Universal Audio Galaxy. This is one of the most true to form and honest sounding RE201 Space Echo style tape echoes I have ever heard in a digital format. I love this thing dearly, and it has a press and hold to do a tape slowdown thing that sounds wonderful. It is not mechanics turning off, but it is mechanics going to minimum speed, which still does something really, really beautiful. But like I said, we're not actually going to talk about either of these, because the one that I want to talk about today is this. The Strymon Volante is a somewhat contentious offering from Strymon, especially to me, but to a fair number of people who are massive fans of the L-Cap. But I think it is, pound for pound, one of the most compelling and competent implementations of tape echo on the market. You have the full kind of 4 read and write heads of a tape echo. You have the built-in spring reverb. You have the ability to kind of change the distance between the tape heads, which is something that my analog tape echo cannot do. You have 3 different types of tape in this thing, from drum to tape to studio. You have 3 different speeds the motor can run at as kind of a digital internal motor. And you have stereo in, stereo out, expression, and MIDI, including kind of a tape slowdown and a sound-on-sound looper built into this. This is why these are the most ubiquitous implementations of this thing. This thing comes in at about 1/10 of the price that the real thing does, and has a wider feature set. It is more available widely. You can throw this into a backpack and take it with you. It can live on your pedal board. It never needs to be rack mounted. The digital format of this kind of thing, and especially the digital format of the Volante specifically, does have some drawbacks. I personally don't think this sounds quite as good as the L-Cap does, and that's a pretty common refrain I have heard from people in the industry. I also don't think it sounds quite as good as the real thing does, but it does have that benefit of the kind of like low cut control, the wear and tear, and the mechanics. And this thing even has the ability, like my real tape echo does, has the ability to pan the delay heads out in a stereo field, which is quite nice. But there is a drawback, which is the first repeat is panned out, but once it kind of cycles into the internal buffer of repeats, they kind of drop back to the center channel. So that wide, beautiful, kind of like panned out delay will not stay out there unless you have them kind of set up as a Haas-affected style stereo delay implementation. So that is a thing worth noting when it comes to the Volante. And the sound-on-sound looper also sums to mono in this unit specifically. This is also, like I said, one of the most versatile versions of this kind of thing. You can use it, instrument directly into it. You can also use it as a reamping solution, much like the real thing can be used, but you aren't going to get that kind of like real analog, kind of like honesty and preampness that you will get from something like the Echofix when you use this as a kind of reamping tool. And one other very, very worthwhile pro when it comes to effect pedals with tape delay is tape delay and tape echo will just exist in a big box device, something like the Strymon Timeline or the Eventide H9 or H90, or a bunch of these kind of like larger multi-effect modules out there. You can get a great sounding tape delay and tape echo in something else. Whereas like this kind of thing is a very specific and standalone investment. You can get great sounding tape in a thing that you bought to do 5 other things, which is quite nice. But all of that does kind of bring me to the kind of one overarching con to tape delay pedals versus especially something like a real unit, which is the real units are such an investment and they are such a specific kind of sound and implementation that the feature set tends to be exactly what somebody who is purchasing something like that is looking for. These are so kind of myriad in their implementations in the world that no individual tape echo, I feel, can be all things to all people. And even your best one probably doesn't cover every base you theoretically would love for it to cover. And so that is the trade-off is I find that with 90% of the tape echoes I use, they are all about 80% to where I'd want them to be. Like I said, I wish this sounded more like the LCAP, but the LCAP doesn't have the feature set that I find so valuable in this. I love the sound of the Galaxy, but it doesn't have MIDI implementation. It doesn't have any form of external control. And those are problems for me when I'm in a live environment. This being the most true to form version of tape echo in terms of the style of tape echo that we are looking at in this video, which is that kind of like multi-reed head space echo style thing. Let's give the Volante a listen. I can't believe this is the first time we've ever specifically highlighted this pedal on this channel. It's been years in the making. And that brings us to category number 3, which is tape delays and tape echoes in plugin format for your computer. And the number one pro in this category, in my opinion, is affordability. You can get one of the best sounding tape delays on the market. An amazing, amazing implementation of tape delay for pretty affordable because it is a software-based thing. A great example of that would be like Soundtoys Echo Boy Jr. is one of my favorite delay plugins to use in my mixing workflow, and the tape delays they have in that just sound wonderful. If you hear post-production tape in my mixes over the last couple of years, it's very frequently just Echo Boy Jr. It sounds amazing. Another great pro for this is you can get a great tape echo in a kind of like wider bundle. Now, whether that's buying something like the whole Soundtoys bundle that comes with that tape, or something like a multi kind of delay format plugin that has a great sounding tape, or even, and this will be the one that we look at for sound samples in this video, the NeuralDSP Mateus Asato Archetype plugin, which is a full suite of guitar effects. It is stomp boxes, amps, delay, and reverb. And it has, and I'm not kidding here, one of the best sounding tape echoes I've ever heard. It is absolutely my favorite sounding tape echo in plugin format. And it's a part of a pretty affordable entire guitar suite as it is. Another pro in this category is they are already in the box, as they say. So if you are writing, producing, and mixing a track, and you want to kind of like grab some tape echo or tape delay to put onto an instrument or to use as a sound design tool, you can just drop it in the box into your signal path and kind of make tweaks as you're listening and real time fine tune exactly the sound you want. And if you need to change it later, you can, because you are in the box. You're not having to print anything to the recording as a process. And when it comes to kind of building out a song, that can be incredibly worthwhile, because it also means you can do things like change parameters as the kind of part evolves. The thing that you played, you can make adjustments to the settings kind of in real time in post, which would take two people and be incredibly difficult to do, or require a full reamping setup to do with either the real tape or a tape delay pedal. And a lot of these plugins can actually be MIDI automated as well. Something like that NeuralDSP plugin that has the amazing tape echo, you can assign CC values that can be controlled externally or out of the box to all the parameters in that echo. You could set up your MIDI controller on the floor at your desk and make real-time changes to the plugin while you are performing into it, which also means that you can use it in a live environment, which I think in turn also kind of speaks to one of the kind of main cons, I would say, for this category of tape delay as an effect, which is this is probably the most difficult to implement live. And there is an irony to that, because I think we as guitar players are maybe the last real holdouts when it comes to not using laptops in live music. Basically, everybody else has made peace with it. I have worked with so many keyboard players who perform live with just a laptop and a MIDI controller, and yet we will use kind of digital amp sims, but we won't use a laptop. I have a 2019 MacBook Pro that I have been recording and producing with for years now. It is getting a little bit old. I have way too much stuff on it. It can get a little laggy, and I have still never had any problems live recording with a plugin on that computer. It is a thing that we should be more comfortable doing, but there is no getting around that it is in many ways kind of the hardest value proposition of the three implementations of tape delay. But that is a shame, because like I said, I don't necessarily think that it should be a barrier to us. Every other musician in the world has proven that it doesn't need to be. And like I said, you can control it with a MIDI controller, and also they can just sound immaculate. Some of these plugins will offer like higher fidelity, higher sample rates than any plugin you have access to, that kind of thing. And they can sound wonderful. Like I said, the one we're going to take a look at in this video is the NeuralDSP Archetype Mateus Asato here in a second. And this is where I want to be very kind of full transparency. Neural are the ones sponsoring this video. It is worth noting they did not reach out to me about this. I hit them up and said, hey, I'm thinking about making this. I really want to highlight this because my big takeaway from the Mateus demo I did a couple months ago was that this tape echo is just immaculate. And they basically said, hey, if you want to spend the time and energy to make a video on this, make whatever you want, and we'll sponsor it. So a huge thanks to Neural for kind of like freeing up a couple of days for me to make this. Really appreciate that. And Huge thanks to them for having no editorial insight on this video. They're not going to see this before it goes out. They have no right of refusal on anything I say in this video, whether it's me talking about feeling reticent about using plugins live or anything else, but they are sponsoring this video. It is not the reason that we are using this tape echo in this portion of the video. That came first. And you'll see when we get into the plugin here in a second, the tape echo in the Mateus Asato plugin is actually a really strong showing for this category, both in terms of just pure sound quality. Trust me, it sounds amazing, but also in terms of it being a kind of shockingly great blending of the two other categories. You have the kind of like core feature set of something like a real tape echo, the multiple reed heads, the kind of same styling and the same kind of sonic beauty of it, but obviously digital versus a real analog tape. But you also still have access to things like a width control, modulation, and some of those other quality of life things that you can get from a plugin or a pedal or anything else. And so I am a huge fan of what this tape echo sounds like. I think Neural made the best delay they've made in years in this Mateus Asato plugin. And yeah, we're just going to give it a listen. And those are, in my opinion, the kind of three main categories of how you can get tape echo into your workflow, coming in at pretty dramatically different price points. The real things all existing in the like $1,500 to $4,000 range, depending on the type of unit you want to chase down, how old it is, how much work it's going to need to keep running. Category 2 being the most widely available. You can walk into any Guitar Center and have your choice of like 5 different tape echoes at any given time. But with the limitations of a piece of hardware that kind of exists on a pedal board and has its own very specific type of power supply. And category 3, the in-the-box, easiest to mix with, most affordable, but potentially least portable depending on what your studio computer workflow looks like. Option that is also probably one of the ones that I use the most these days. So let me know in the comments, like I said at the start of the video, if this is a format you find useful, whether it's just interesting to you or whether you find some specific value pulled from it. Let me know which of these 3 is kind of the one you use the most, and if kind of you were being aspirational, which is the one that you would chase down ideally. And outside of that, thank you so much for watching. I guess obligatory plug to my Patreon. It gives you access to a Discord community for Patreon supporters. It's an awesome small community of musicians, and we sit around and we talk gear, we talk cocktails, we talk TV, and they're just it's a small group of people who I think are just really, really cool. And I think that you would enjoy hanging out with us. So if you want to go check that out, feel free. And if not, no hard feelings, and I'll see you next time.